Two men are sitting at a bar, quietly drinking. After a while, one turns to the other and says, "I can't help but notice from your accent. Are you from Ireland?" The other man beams. "That I am." "Well, so am I. What part?" "Dublin, of course." The first man sits up excitedly. "Get out of here." "I'm from Dublin, too. What street did you grow up on?" "Ah, a lovely little spot, McCleary Street, right in the old part of town." The first man nearly spills his drink. "McCleary Street? You don't say. I grew up there, too. Tell me, what school did you go to?" "Why, St. Mary's, naturally." The first man claps his hands. "This is unbelievable. I went to St. Mary's myself. What year did you graduate?" "Well, now, I graduated in 1964. The first man slaps the bar. "Saints preserve us! I graduated in '64 as well. This is incredible." At that moment, another patron walks in, sits down, and orders a beer. The bartender shakes his head and mutters, "Ah, great. Looks like the Murphy twins are drunk again." A woman is walking through the park when she spots a very attractive man sitting on a bench. He's reading a book and eating fruit from a Tupperware container. After working up the courage, she approaches, sits next to him, and says, "Sorry to bother you, but I'd love to grab a coffee with you sometime." The man, flattered, smiles and asks, "Sure, but what makes you think we'd get along so well?" The woman grins. "A couple of things, actually. First, I noticed you're wearing an Iron Maiden t-shirt. They're my all-time favorite band. My parents took me to see them in Cleveland on their reunion tour in '99. It was my first concert ever." The man's eyes widen. "No way. I saw them in Cleveland in '99 too. It was my first concert on my own. My best friend Jimmy Spitz and I snuck out, took a bus into the city, and saw them play at the Plain Dealer Pavilion." They both stare at each other in disbelief. "That's crazy," the woman continues. "But here's another thing. I saw you're reading Mark Twain. I was a communications major, and I actually wrote my thesis on how Twain used satire to comment on current events, comparing him to modern satirical news. He's my favorite author." Now the man is really taken aback. "Get out of here. I was an English major specializing in 19th century American literature. This is like my 5th time reading Tom Sawyer. I love Twain." They sit there, stunned. "All right," the woman says. "Brace yourself, because here's the icing on the cake. I noticed you're eating a prune. Prunes are my absolute favorite fruit. My grandfather grew them on his farm when I was a kid. You're eating a prune. I love prunes. This has got to be fate. What do you say?" The man puts down his fruit, looks at her, and replies with a smile. "It's a date." A huge, muscular man with a tiny head walks into a bar and orders a beer. The bartender hands him the drink and says, "You know, I'm not gay, but I've got to say, your physique is incredible. Just one question, though. Why is your head so small?" The big guy nods slowly, clearly having heard this question many times before. "Well," he says, "one day I was out hunting when I got lost in the woods. As I was trying to find my way back, I heard someone crying for help. I looked around and, to my surprise, the sound was coming from a frog sitting next to a stream. I picked up the frog and it spoke to me. 'Kiss me, and I will turn into a genie and grant you 3 wishes.' I looked around to make sure I was alone, then figured, why not? So I kissed the frog. Poof! The frog turned into the most beautiful, voluptuous, naked woman I had ever seen. She smiled and said, 'You now have 3 wishes.' First thing I did was look down at my scrawny 60-kilo frame and say, 'I want a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger.' She nodded, whispered a spell, and poof! Instantly I was ripped, so huge I tore right out of my clothes. Then she asked, 'What will be your second wish?' I looked at her stunning body and said, 'I want to make love to you, right here by this stream.' She nodded again, lay down and beckoned me. We made love for hours. It was absolutely incredible. Afterward, as we lay there sweating under the moonlight, she leaned in close and whispered, "You still have one more wish. What will it be?" I thought for a moment, then said, "You know what? How about a little head?" A man is traveling on a ship when, 2 days into the journey, disaster strikes. A violent storm rolls in, and the ship sinks. Clinging desperately to a piece of the mast, he barely survives and washes up on an uncharted island. Days turn into months, and months into years. A full decade passes. No ships ever come. He has been completely alone. Until one day, something catches his eye. A speck appears in the distance. It can't be a ship, he tells himself. No ship has ever come. As it draws closer, he rules out the possibility of a small boat or even a raft. Then, to his absolute shock, emerging from the surf is a stunning blonde woman in a sleek wetsuit and scuba gear. She approaches, looking him over with sympathy. "My God, you look like you've been through hell," she says. "How long has it been since you've had a cigarette?" 10 years, he croaks. The woman reaches into a waterproof pocket on her sleeve and pulls out a pack of cigarettes. The man grabs one, lights it, and takes a long, deep drag. "Oh, that's good," he sighs. "And how long has it been since you've had a sip of bourbon?" she asks. Trembling, he whispers, 10 years. Sure enough, she unzips her other sleeve and produces a flask. The man takes a swig, his eyes lighting up. This is the best day of my life," he exclaims. The woman gives him a sultry smile, then slowly unzips the front of her wetsuit. "Tell me," she purrs, "how long has it been since you've had some real fun?" Tears well up in the castaway's eyes. He falls to his knees, hands clasped together, and sobs. "Dear Lord, don't tell me you've got a game of Twister in there." A man was peacefully driving down a winding road when, out of nowhere, a bunny hopped right in front of his car. He slammed the brakes, but it was too late. He hit the bunny head-on. Horrified, he jumped out to check. There, lying motionless in the middle of the road, was none other than the Easter Bunny. The man gasped, "Oh no, what have I done? I've ruined Easter! Who will deliver the eggs now?" He dropped to his knees, overcome with guilt. Just then, a woman in a red convertible pulled up. Seeing the distraught man, she asked, "What's wrong?" He wiped his tears and explained, "I just ran over the Easter Bunny. Easter is ruined, and it's all my fault." The woman nodded knowingly, ran back to her car, and pulled out a spray bottle. She hurried over to the lifeless bunny and sprayed it generously. Poof! Suddenly, the bunny sprang to life. It dashed into the woods, stopped, turned around, and waved. Then it hopped another 10 feet, stopped, and waved again. Then another 10 feet, another wave. It kept going, hopping and waving until it disappeared from sight. The man, completely dumbfounded, turned to the woman. "That was incredible. What on earth was in that spray bottle?" She smiled and held it up. "Oh, just a little something called hairspray. It revitalizes hair and adds permanent wave." A postal worker's job was to process all mail with illegible addresses. One day he came across a letter simply addressed to God. Curious, he opened it. The letter read, "Dear God, I am an 83-year-old widow living on a very small pension. Yesterday, someone stole my purse, which had $100, all the money I had until my next check. Next Sunday is Christmas, and I had invited 2 friends over for dinner. Without that money, I have nothing to buy food with. I have no family to turn to. You are my only hope. Can you please help me? Sincerely, Edna." The postal worker was deeply moved. He shared the letter with his coworkers, and one by one, they all chipped in from their own pockets. By the end of the day, they had collected $96. Not quite the full amount, but close. They placed the cash in an envelope and anonymously mailed it to Edna. For the rest of the week, the postal workers felt a warm glow, imagining Edna and her friends enjoying a lovely Christmas dinner. A few days later, another letter to God arrived. Excited, the workers gathered as the first man opened it. Dear God, how can I ever thank you enough for what you did for me? Because of your gift, I was able to prepare a glorious Christmas dinner for my friends. We had a wonderful day, and I told them all about your kindness. By the way, there was $4 missing. I think it must have been those bastards at the post office. A poor man is strolling through the city on a Friday evening, wondering how he can get some extra cash. Suddenly, a puff of smoke appears, and out steps the devil himself. With a chilling whisper, the devil says, "Take all the money in your pocket, go to the casino, and put it on number 27. The man is startled but intrigued. What does he have to lose? He rushes to the casino, withdraws every cent he can from the ATM, and places it all on 27. To his amazement, he wins. He stumbles out in shock, only to find the devil waiting for him. Take all your winnings, go back inside, put it all on 27. The man hesitates. Again? Yes, do it! Heart-pounding, he obeys. He places everything on 27 and wins again. The entire casino is stunned. The roulette wheel is checked. No bias, no trickery, just sheer, unbelievable luck. Reluctantly, the staff hands him nearly $200,000. He steps outside, beaming, only to see the devil waiting once more. One more time. Everything on 27. At this point, the man is beyond doubt. He rushes back in, bets it all on 27, and wins again. Now the casino is in chaos. Millions of dollars are handed over. The man walks out a legend, glowing with excitement. He turns to the devil and grins. I don't know why people say you're the most sinister being there is. You've been amazing to me. The devil stares at him, shakes his head, and groans. You know something? You are the luckiest son of a gun I have ever bloody seen. A statistics professor is heading to a conference and passes through airport security. To everyone's shock, a bomb is found in his carry-on. He's immediately hauled off for interrogation. I don't understand, the officer exclaims. You're a respected professor, a devoted family man, a pillar of your community. Why on earth would you try to blow up a plane? Blow up the plane? The professor interrupts, looking offended. Oh no, I would never do that. The officer stares. Then why in the world did you bring a bomb? The professor sighs and begins explaining patiently. You see, statistically, the probability of a bomb being on a plane is 1 in 1,000. That's uncomfortably high. Too high for me to relax on a flight. Okay, the officer says, confused. Now, the probability of 2 bombs being on the same plane is 1 in 1,000,000. That's practically 0. So, if I bring my own bomb, I've drastically reduced the chance of there being another one. It's simple statistics. I'm actually making the flight safer. The officer just stares. Then he picks up the phone. Yeah, we're gonna need backup. At NC State University, 4 sophomore students were acing their organic chemistry class. They had nailed every quiz, midterm, and lab, carrying solid A's into the final exam. Feeling confident, they decided to celebrate early by heading to the University of Virginia for a wild weekend with friends. They partied hard. So hard, in fact, that they overslept on Sunday and didn't make it back to Raleigh until early Monday morning, long after the final had ended. Panicked, they came up with a plan. They found their professor and explained, "We were all set to come back Sunday to study, but we had a flat tire on the way home. No spare, no help. It was a nightmare. We just couldn't make it back in time." The professor thought for a moment, then nodded. "All right, you can take a makeup exam tomorrow." The students breathed a sigh of relief. That night, they studied like crazy, preparing for the test they almost missed. The next day, they arrived on time, feeling ready. The professor seated them in separate rooms, handed each a test booklet, and told them to begin. They opened the first page. Question 1. 5 points. A basic problem about free radical formation. Easy, they all thought, scribbling down the answer. Then they flipped the page. Question 2, 95 points. Which tire was flat? A student storms up to his professor holding his exam. Professor, why did you give me an 80? The professor glances at the paper. Because that's the grade you deserve. The student smirks. Tell you what, if I bite my own eye, will you bump it up to an 85? The professor chuckles. Yeah, sure, kid. Go ahead. Without hesitation, the student pops out his glass eye and bites it. The professor, stunned, sighs and marks 85 on the paper. But the student isn't done. If I bite my own nose, will you make it a 90? The professor narrows his eyes. No way you can do that. But fine, if you somehow manage it, 90. The student takes out his dentures and bites his nose. The professor, now thoroughly baffled, shakes his head and marks 90 on the paper. Then the student grins. Final offer. If I get on this desk and pee Coco Chanel perfume on you, will you give me a 100? By now, the professor has to see how far this kid will go. If you can do that, you get your 100. The student climbs on the desk and pees all over the professor. The professor, drenched, sniffs his soaked shirt. What the hell? This isn't Coco Chanel. This is just piss. The student shrugs. Fine, let's leave it at 90. A group of first-year medical students gathered nervously around their first cadaver in anatomy class. The body lay on the table, covered by a white sheet. The professor looked at them seriously and said, In medicine, there are 2 essential qualities every doctor must have. The first is that you should never be disgusted by anything involving the human body. With that, he pulled back the sheet, stuck his finger into the cadaver's anus, withdrew it, and put it in his mouth. The students recoiled in horror. Some gagged, but one by one, reluctant and pale, they followed suit, sticking their fingers in and sucking on them. When the last student had finished, the professor nodded and said, The second most important quality is observation. He held up his hand. I stuck in my middle finger but sucked on my index finger. Now learn to pay attention. A duck walks into a pub and orders a beer and a ham sandwich. The barman stares at him and says, But you're a duck. I see your eyes are working, replies the duck. And you talk, exclaims the barman. I see your ears are working too, says the duck. Now, can I have my beer and sandwich, please? The barman serves him, still amazed. We don't get many ducks in here. What brings you this way? I'm working on the building site across the road, the duck replies. This routine continues for 2 weeks. The duck comes in daily for his beer and sandwich. Then one day, the circus comes to town. The ringleader stops by the pub, and the barman excitedly says, Hey, I know a duck that would be perfect for your circus. He talks, drinks beer, the whole lot. Really? Says the ringleader. That sounds amazing. Tell him to get in touch. The next day, when the duck comes in, the barman grins. Hey, Mr. Duck, I've got you a top job, big money. Oh, yeah? Says the duck. Where at? The circus. The duck frowns. The circus? Yep. You mean that place with the big tent? That's right. With all the animals? Of course. With the big canvas roof and the hole in the middle? Exactly. The duck looks confused. What the heck would they want with a plasterer? Joe and his buddy Jim were known around town for being a little less than clever, especially when they weren't drunk. One scorching day, they were digging a ditch while their foreman lounged in the shade, sipping lemonade. Joe wiped his brow and looked up at him. Hey, Jim, Yeah? How come we're down here busting our backs, and the boss is up there drinking lemonade? Jim shrugged. Dunno. They kept digging, but after a while, Joe couldn't take it anymore. I'm gonna go ask. He climbed out of the ditch and walked up to the foreman. Hey, boss, how come me and Jim are down there digging in the heat and you're up here relaxing? The foreman smirked. Because I have intelligence and you don't. Joe scratched his head. What's intelligence? The foreman thought for a moment. Here, I'll show you. He held his hand up against the trunk of a big oak tree. Now, hit my hand as hard as you can. Joe shrugged, reared back, and swung, just as the foreman pulled his hand away. Joe's fist slammed straight into the tree. Ow! What the hell was that for? Joe yelped, shaking his bruised knuckles. The foreman grinned. I just gave you some intelligence. Joe rubbed his sore hand and slowly climbed back into the ditch. Jim looked up. So, what did he say? Joe frowned. He said it's 'cause he has a lot of intelligence. I got a little intelligence. And you don't got any intelligence at all. Jim blinked. What's intelligence? Joe thought for a moment, then grinned. I'm not sure, but he gave me some, and now I'm going to give some to you. He held his hand in front of his own face. Now hit my hand as hard as you can. Two men and a woman were stranded on an island after a plane crash. They quickly adapted, building a shelter, finding food and water, and generally making the best of their situation. Life was manageable, and they were surviving comfortably. After a month on the island, the woman approached the two men and said, Okay, guys, let's be honest. I have needs, and you both do too. Let's just get it over with. We'll take turns. One day it's you, she said to the first man, and the next, it's the other. For an entire month, the three of them lived out this arrangement, taking turns and indulging their desires. But tragically, after this month of shared companionship, the woman fell ill from a rotten banana or some other unfortunate cause, and died. The two men mourned her loss for a week, and then one of them approached the other. All right, man, let's be honest. I have needs, you have needs. Let's do it. We'll take turns. One day it's you, the next, it's me. And so they spent another month taking turns, enjoying each other's company. But eventually, the first man turned to the second and said, Okay, man, I need to talk to you. The second man responded, Yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. We've had a good time, the first man continued, but I think it's time we stop. The second man nodded, agreeing. Yeah, I feel the same way. This doesn't feel right anymore. After a moment of quiet understanding, the first man said, Well then, shall we bury her? Shall we bury? A newlywed couple had only been married for 2 weeks, and the husband, though deeply in love, was itching to go out with his old buddies. One evening, he turned to his wife and said, Honey, I'll be right back. Where are you going, Coochie-Coo? She asked sweetly. Just to the bar, pretty face. Gonna grab a beer. She smiled and opened the fridge, revealing 25 different kinds of beer from 12 different countries, Germany, Holland, Japan, India, you name it. The husband blinked. Yeah, lollipop, but at the bar, you know, they serve beer in frozen glasses. Before he could finish, she pulled a massive mug from the freezer, so frosty that just holding it gave her chills. You mean like this? Puppy face? The husband swallowed hard. Yeah. But at the bar, they have, hors d'oeuvres. Those little appetizers that are really delicious. She grinned, opened the oven, and pulled out 5 trays of snacks. Chicken wings, pigs in blankets, mushroom caps, pork strips. The works. You mean like these, Poochie-Poo? Sweat formed on the husband's brow. He tried again. But, My sweet honey bun. At the bar, they have, swearing, dirty words and all that." The wife leaned in, smiled sweetly, and said, "You want dirty words, Sugar Plum? Fine. Drink your bloody beer in your darn frozen mug and eat your stupid snacks because you're married now and you aren't going anywhere. Got it, moron?" The husband sat down quietly and sipped his beer. Marriage, game, set, match. A man, thoroughly inebriated, staggered up to a fairground rifle range and slammed down his money. The booth operator hesitated. "Mate, you're too drunk. This could be dangerous." But the drunk insisted, so the operator reluctantly handed him the rifle. The man squinted, swayed, and then, after much effort, pulled the trigger 3 times. To everyone's astonishment, he hit 3 bullseye. The star prize for the night was a luxurious 68-piece glassware set, but the booth operator, convinced the drunk had no idea what he'd done, handed him a consolation prize instead, a turtle. The drunk took it, grunted in approval, and stumbled off into the crowd. An hour later, now even drunker, he returned. "Gimme another go," he slurred. Once again, the booth operator tried to refuse, but the drunk wouldn't take no for an answer. He grabbed the rifle, wobbled, and fired 3 times, 3 more bullseyes. The showman, cursing his luck, sighed and handed him another turtle. The drunk mumbled something incoherent and staggered away. Yet another hour passed, and, against all odds, he returned once more, barely able to stand. "One more shot," he demanded. At this point, the booth operator figured, why not? He handed over the rifle, the drunk aimed, or at least attempted to, and bang, 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 3 more bullseyes. But this time, a sharp-eyed onlooker in the crowd spoke up. "Hey, wait a minute! This guy just hit 3 more bulls! He should get the star prize!" The booth operator sighed, knowing he'd been caught. He made a big show of inspecting the target before turning to the crowd. "Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is incredible. Congratulations, sir. You've won tonight's grand prize, this magnificent 68-piece glassware set." The drunk frowned, furrowing his brow in deep thought. Then he slurred, "I don't want any bloody glasses. Just give me another one of those crusty meat pies." A man walked into a bar, sat down, and asked the bartender, "If I impress you, can I have a free drink?" The bartender shrugged. "Sure, why not?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny piano. Then he pulled out a small rat and set it on the bar. The rat scurried up to the bench, cracked its tiny knuckles, and started playing beautiful music. The bartender's jaw dropped. "That's incredible!" He poured the man a beer. The man took a sip and said, "If I impress you even more, can I have free drinks for life?" The bartender, still in shock, said, "There's no way you can top that, but sure." The man reached into his pocket again and pulled out a frog. The frog climbed onto the piano and started singing along. At that moment, a wealthy-looking man with a cane walked into the bar. He saw the tiny musicians, eyes widening in amazement. "I'll give you $2 million for them," he said. The owner shook his head. "Sorry, they're not for sale." "All right, I'll give you $500,000 just for the frog," the man offered. The owner thought for a moment, then nodded. "Deal." The wealthy man handed over the cash, picked up the frog, and left. The bartender was stunned. "Are you crazy? That frog was worth a fortune. It could sing." The owner just smirked and took another sip of his beer. "Relax," he said. "The rat's a ventriloquist." A routine police patrol was parked outside a bar in the outback, watching as Last Call wrapped up. The officer noticed a stumbling drunk leaving the bar, so intoxicated he could barely stand. The man wobbled around the parking lot for several minutes, fumbling with his keys, trying them on 5 different cars before finally finding his own and collapsing into the driver's seat. He sat there for a while as other bar patrons got in their cars and drove off without a hitch. Then, the man started his car, but didn't drive away. Instead, he turned the wipers on and off on a perfectly dry night, flicked the indicators back and forth, honked the horn, and flashed the headlights. He inched forward, reversed a little, and then just sat there. More cars left the lot. Finally, when he was the only one left, he pulled out onto the road and drove away, slowly, carefully, perfectly. The officer, having patiently observed this whole charade, immediately put on the lights and pulled him over. Administering a breathalyzer test, the officer was stunned when the result came back 0. Not a trace of alcohol. Dumbfounded, the officer said, "You'll have to come to the station. This breathalyzer must be broken." The man grinned. "I doubt it, mate. Tonight, I'm the designated decoy."